Okay, and our next presentation comes from Dr. Joseph Lehar, who is the Senior Vice President of Strategy at Owkin. Thank you, Dr. Lehar.
My name is Joseph Lehar. I'm an SVP of Strategy at Owkin, and I'm here to tell you about federated learning generally and also how we're implementing it at Owkin. So as a bit of background, it helps to sort of recognize that the volume of health data is surging. There's an enormous amount of information being gathered about patients in different ways, and the total volume has gone up dramatically in the last few decades. The one major challenge with the health data is that it's actually rather hard to get hold of them, and this arises from several major factors. The production of health data is decentralized. It comes from many different sources, hospitals, companies, and devices. Medical data are also highly regulated. These are personal and sensitive information that fall under strict guidelines like the GDPR that basically need to be adhered to as you're managing and making use of these data. And finally, medical data are actually highly valuable. It's quite expensive to generate the data. The value is perceived to be very high, and it's entering into a market where it's also fairly highly priced in the first place. An additional challenge is that the providers of data exist in a kind of competitive ecosystem. They generate data for their own use. They're also trying to make it available for others to use, and it all has to be managed in a way that deals with the competing interests. So really the bottom line across all of these concerns is that collaboration between data managers is essential, because the expensive and hard to get nature of the data means that we really need to bring it together from different sources. But privacy and security of those data are paramount considerations when you're putting these together. Federated data access is a way to sort of break the silos that we're describing and make it possible to reach global data sets. And this slide basically explains the concept to you. So first of all, on the left is the traditional approach to bringing together data from different sources, which is basically data pooling. With data pooling, the basic premise is that you bring the data to the model. So if you look at this image on the left, what you have is a number of different institutes that are generating data. A central provider, a central aggregator, will find a way of bringing the data, copies of the data, into a central location, and they'll put it all together and do their analysis of the data in all one set. The federated approach goes exactly the opposite direction. So the goal with federation is to take your model of the data, move it behind the security firewall of one of your institutes, learn what you need to do about that institute's data, and then just move the parameters and the model from one place to another. So that over time, the federated model learns about the information in all of the different sources, but without the central organizing company at the background ever having direct access to the individual patient data. So what that does is that gives you three major advantages. First of all, federation is fundamentally secure and private, since the aggregating company never actually sees the data directly. It completely protects the patient from a GDPR perspective and maintains security of the information for proprietary sources. The second big advantage is that the institute or the provider of the data actually controls their data, and that's actually extremely important because they want to be able to have full control and ownership of everything that comes out of the information that they've gathered on their patients or other sources of biological data. And finally, it's efficient and scalable. So it's worth noting that Google actually has largely deployed federated approaches towards analyzing cell phones across the world. This is an enterprise that wouldn't be possible unless they federated, because it would put them into serious legal constraints if they were to actually download copies of your private data, and fundamentally would also destroy their data centers because it would just be far too much data to manage. When you look at federation in terms of other ways of achieving collaborative machine learning, it sort of helps to think about three major aspects. One is data privacy. The other is algorithm privacy, i.e. protecting the way that you do your analytics. And the third will be performance, compute power. And all of these factors need to be taken into account as you look at different approaches towards bringing data together from different sources. One way of addressing this is differential privacy, where with this method, you essentially hide the original data under structured noise. You essentially mess around with the data enough that you're able to conceal a patient's identity or other disclosing factors that will be an issue. This is basically what's recommended in HIPAA and other regulatory approaches for managing de-identification. Homomorphic encryption is another way of sort of altering the data and replacing them with encrypted forms that cannot be decoded unless you have access to a key that only the validated owner can receive. Another approach is federated learning. And really with federated learning, it allows you to take the kinds of approaches that are used, it allows you to move to a higher level of performance while maintaining the kind of protection that you get for differential privacy. And finally, if you reinforce federated learning with certain hardening approaches where you protect the algorithm, aggregate the data in a protective way, and allow for trustless traceability, it brings you up to the algorithm privacy levels of the homomorphic and multi-party computation approaches, while reaching the performance levels that you can get from standard FL. We very much view that federation is really the future for data management for AI and medical research. Basically, it enables you to take collaborations between different sources of data and make analyses from data available for pharma researchers, for clinical researchers, for patients, manufacturers, and for hospitals. At Owkin, we've put together software to do this in particular, and our software is called Substra. It's actually been available. We've made it available at the Linux Foundation, where you can download it for open source use. And fundamentally what it does is it uses a protected federated learning approach. So essentially it operates in different stages where over various rounds, we'll take the models, visit them into a particular data center, bring back the models and average the models together. And that averaging process is essentially where we protect the sources of it, protect the sources of the information and disguise it. So that way we are never aware of where particular data sets came from. And obviously when we share the model with the participants, they also are unaware of where other people's data came from. How we apply it at Owkin is that we essentially have put together modules to address the different parts of managing these data. First of all, we will store the data. So, for example, when we're working in a clinical setting, we have multiple hospitals that we're engaged with. And in each case, we have Substra servers that we set up at that hospital where the data gets stored and registered on their side. We then register a model that will then deal with the data that have been stored on at the individual site. We can then enter into training and performance phases, and Substra has modules that allow you to address all those different components. Why we think that it's a particularly helpful way to address healthcare data is that fundamentally it has these major qualities. It's data agnostic. You can use this on a variety of different data modalities. It's framework agnostic. You can work with any kind of machine or technology, analytics technology that you'd like to apply it. It's agnostic to infrastructure. It can be widely used in a flexible manner. We've built it from the ground up to be traceable. So if any data point can be traced back to its origins. And fundamentally, it's secure. Again, if the individual information from a patient can be protected, or the proprietary information from a company can be protected. One nice case study that we have of where we've brought federated approaches to a very challenging environment is actually the Melody collaboration. So with the Melody collaboration, we basically got 10 pharma companies to collaborate by bringing their data sets in connection together so they could learn from each other's experience from their structure activity models. So essentially learning how chemical structures relate to biological activity. This is highly sensitive information that pharma companies collect individually over decades and consider part of their essential data resource. However, the diversity of each individual company's library is limited. And as a result, there's a great interest in combining their library with libraries from other from other pharmas to learn how representative what they find is of other people's experience. Federation made it possible to do that. We set up a collaboration with 10 of these pharma companies, with Janssen as the major coordinator on the pharma side, and other partners, which were a combination of AI companies and academics to manage the modeling and the technology part of it. And we were the coordinators on the other side of it. And together we brought it all together. We found coming out of the analysis that all 10 pharma companies saw improvement in the performance of their models when assessing how well they could predict the binding results from their experiments based on the context of what they learned from the other experiments. It's worth noting that the performance measures that we looked at only could investigate overlaps between data sets. And a much more valuable way of measuring the performance of a federated system is not so much on how well you can predict after you've federated, but more on how much diversity is in the library that you're analyzing in the first place. We did not analyze that in the original reports, coming out of Melody, but I expect that were we to do that, we would see considerably more benefit to be seen, especially for the larger companies. When we brought it to the clinic, we've also brought Substrat to the clinic, working with a number of hospitals to bring their data together in Federation to address the different cancer types, especially. So with the health chain and the Optima collaborations, we're working with a number of clinics in Europe to basically connect their information on different cancers. And we're also initiating different federated learning efforts in the immunology and also in the digital signal space, through a variety of other consortia that we have. Overall, we have a large number of academic partners involving very high-profile hospitals on 2 continents. We also have consortia that span both those continents to address this, and there's 10 major consortia that we've entered into so far. Those data all go into our multimodal patient data repository that we use as input for our platform. And our platform basically puts together 3 major capabilities: federated data access, which we described before; multimodal integration, which allows us to combine information from many different kinds of data, and then we use AI to make sense of it, of everything that comes out of it. Those 3 aspects of our platform are then applied towards 3 major outputs. The first output is diagnostics, where essentially we learn from our patient data how to break patients into groups where that might correspond to different outcomes or drug responses. Secondly, we use the information that we've gathered in our federated patient data resources to help pharmaceutical companies solve many of their clinical development problems. Specifically, we can help them select patients more effectively. We can help them make their trial analytics more efficient, and we can also make it easier for them to detect signals coming out of clinical trials that they're either engaging or planning. And finally, the third output represents what we consider the future of our company, which is to really generate drug discovery insights. And the way that we want to go about using drug discovery is essentially a reverse translational precision medicine approach. So what does that mean? Reverse translation is basically a very old idea, which is to look at patient data to infer things that might be used for potential treatments. Our approach to it is to take multimodal data representing clinical histology imaging, RNA sequence or molecular profiling of RNA and DNA, and also novel modalities like spatial or single-cell omics, and essentially use those to group patients into clusters that have evidence of very different biology. I find it helpful often to make a concrete example. So if you look at an indication like triple-negative breast cancer, it is actually a very poor outcome indication in cancers. And one of the reasons why the outcomes are so poor is because it's not actually one biology. It's many different biologies. And when you're stuck in a situation like that, what you'll find is that it's almost impossible to find drugs, to find targets that could be used to develop drugs on, because any signal that might exist within the TNBC population is drowned out by all of the competing signals from other biologies that are present. If you do find a mechanism that has relevance to TNBC, your clinical trials based on that target will tend to fail because most patients don't have the matching biology. So the only way that you can address that and many other diseases is to first break TNBC into subtypes that have very different biology. Once you've done that within each subtype, you can first try to identify biomarkers that will select patients that belong to that subtype, and then secondly, highlight mechanisms, biological mechanisms that can be targeted for with potential drugs. And our approach to drug discovery is to essentially both build biomarkers and do target discovery on subtypes that we are able to reveal from our multimodal data, and ultimately move towards finding the right drug for each patient, which is the goal of precision medicine. So with that, I just want to end by encouraging all of the audience to consider joining our revolution towards precision medicine, and here are a number of ways that you can reach us and find out more about the company. And thank you very much for your attention.